Welcome, and one more extra welcome, and even one more extra welcome after that to everybody part of our continuing series of discussions where we talk to professors around America. We're up to about 70 or 80 right now, but we're also talking to activists, philosophers, people on the right, people on the left, reporters, and different people from academia, from political science to economics to a lot of psychology. And we don't care what the perspective is. We just want to provide a variety of different perspectives from people who are thoughtful to you, the public, so that you could do this thing that I was told to do in high school. I think it's cool. Not so cool anymore. It was cool in high school, but I don't know. I'm trying to bring it back. It's called thinking for yourself. Maybe we'll have it back. Maybe we won't. I don't know. Renaissance period. Anyways, with us today is Professor Jeff Sherman. He's a professor of psychology at UC Davis. And let's see here. He is, get this right, investigates the cognitive processes underlying social psychology and behavior, how people acquire stereotypes and prejudice, how stereotypes and prejudice affect our perceptions and memories of other people, the extent to which these biases are efficient or even automatic, and how people may or may not control unwanted stereotypes and prejudices. Dr. Sherman is a professor in the Department of Psychology at the University of California, Davis. His research investigates the cognitive processes underlying social psychology and behavior. In particular, he is interested in how stereotypes and prejudice affect how people perceive themselves, other people, and groups of people. He has authored more than 90 scientific publications on these topics. Dr. Sherman is an editor of the Journal of Social Cognition. He is the 2019 president of the Society of Experimental Social Psychology, the past president of the International Social Cognition Network, and is a fellow of the Association for Psychological Science, the Society of Personality and Social Psychology, and the Society for Experimental Social Psychology. He won the Theoretical Innovation Prize presented by the Society for Personality and Social Psychology, and is a recipient of the Anneliese Mayer Research Award from the Alexander von Humboldt Foundation, whose Stereotyping and Prejudice is funded by the National Institute of Health and Science Foundation. In addition to appointment in psychology, Jeff Sherman is an affiliated member of the Center for Mind and Brain. He's also a principal investigator at the Cognition Lab. Starting to get feedback. We'll end it there because you want to get too much feedback. Ow. Did we get any? Do I need to correct something? Muted. Are you muted on your end? I can't hear you. Okay.
Yes, I was muted.
Okay, sorry. Yes. Did I get anything wrong? Do we need to correct something, Professor?
Yeah, I'm no longer editor at Social Cognition. My term ended in January.
Okay, I apologize.
No worries. I should update my information online.
So let me start with the basics. You are an academic professor. You have a background in psychology, but I'm imagining that you've been awake and alive in America over the last couple decades. So let me ask you the starter question we ask everybody, and I'm sure the answer is obvious to you, but I have to ask. Do we have a problem with political polarization in America today, or is everything just fine? You know, we've had tough times before. It's not that bad. People are overblowing it. Or are we seeing something that is serious and deserving of worry?
My subjective sense is that it's worse than it was before, and that, things aren't great right now.
Worse than it was maybe 5 years ago?
I'd say no. I think 5 years ago is probably, I would say it's been about this bad since about January of 2017, maybe November of 2016.
Okay, or November. So that is alluding to the election of American President Donald J. Trump, I think is his middle name. Did we not have political polarization before Trump? Did we exist in a state of near perfect nature, almost a romantic utopia? And then Trump came along and he alone blew it all up. And if we could just get rid of him, or if we could travel back in time and not make him happen, there never would have been any problems and we'd be fine.
I certainly wouldn't say that. I mean, I don't study political polarization, so I don't know actually what the data show, but I'm sure it's been a problem for a long time.
Yeah, just
But
your impression.
yeah, but the heat seems to have turned up quite a bit since then, I would say, with sort of people no longer even agreeing on sort of the basic facts that we're discussing, which to me
What
seems new.
what are the big psychological differences that you're noticing? So one is people can't agree upon facts. What are some of the other examples that you can say from your personal experience that I understand you're not an expert in political polarization, but you do have a psychological background. You are a trained critical thinker. What are some of the other things that you go, I remember people used to not do that 5 years ago, and now I see them do that a lot. Personal interactions, things you've seen on TV, things you've seen in academia, with people. What behaviors have you noticed that seem to be new and are not positive? You already named one.
I think in general, what I'd say is political parties used to stand, I think, more for particular issues. And now political parties seem to be more of a sort of identity issue where people, I have seen some of the data on, how people think about others who are or aren't in their political party and sort of the extent of dislike, everything from unwilling to date to unwilling to unwilling to have as a neighbor. I think all that is pretty new. I mean, I'm old enough to have grown up in a time where, it was there was always political difference, but, there seemed to be more of a willingness to work with people who didn't necessarily agree with you.
Mm.
Um, and that seems to me to be greatly diminished at this point.
So two questions. One is still an observational question. Some academics who've been studying political division, have said, "Oh, it's just the elites. The elites are polarized, but we, the American people, are not polarized. It's just the elites." Is that true from what you've seen? I'm not asking from an academic standpoint. I have questions from an academic standpoint for you. This is more just, I'm an American. I live in America. I got two eyeballs that work, and I'm trying to think critically. Does it seem like the people themselves are polarized, or is it just the elites and we don't need to conclude that people themselves are polarized at all?
Well, I mean, I think it's pretty hard to argue that it's just the elites. I mean, Trump's base is generally not the elites. So, I mean, if anything, it seems right now there's a division between those who consider themselves to be not elite and those who are elite. Yeah, it's definitely not only among elite. In fact, I guess it's probably smaller among the elite.
Some people have said the elites signal with their behaviors to the masses and then they follow it. And so if we had politicians do the opposite and stop signaling these negative things, like if AOC and Donald Trump came out tomorrow and said, you know what, I disagree with this person, but we need to calm the vitriol down, and I'm going to sit down and have a conversation. And they actually sat down with each other and had a conversation and go, well, I disagree, but I respectfully listen to your points. If we saw behavior like that from some of these most polarizing politicians, would the public take that and automatically go, oh, time to stop being polarized? The elites are signaling that they're getting along. So now we can just all calm down our anger that we've built up over the last 5 to 7 years, and we can go back to the nice, peaceful state we were before Trump. Does that sound reasonable, that if elites started behaving in a better way, people would automatically snap right back to the way they were before Trump?
No, not easily or automatically. It would certainly help. But I think at this point it'll take a lot more than that to really get the genie back in the bottle. But that would certainly be helpful. But yeah, I don't think that would change things immediately or automatically for sure.
What more would we need to do, and how long would it take to do that?
Um,
Your psychologist background, how do we get all these people who hate each other to start feeling love again?
yeah, I mean, it would definitely take a sustained effort from leadership. It would require interpersonal contact between people who have different opinions, being willing to talk and listen to each other. Um, I mean, those are or it could come from some superordinate threat pulling all Americans together. Like, another war would pull all Americans together quickly for at least a little while. And no, I'm not advocating for that. Those are the kinds of things that tend to reduce division in a society. If there's a common threat. But
I've heard that.
I think
I've heard.
generally increasing the idea that everybody has shared fate, that we have shared threats and shared benefits, um, that helps.
I've heard that. I've heard that. My response is we had 9/11 and Americans came together.
Yeah.
And that lasted about a year and a half before we blew that up into polarization.
Yep.
Um, Climate change is an existential threat that brings everybody together. Russia invading Ukraine and throwing back democracy is an existential threat that brings everybody together. You would think children being executed en masse routinely would be an existential threat that would bring everybody together. None of these existential superordinate threats have pulled people together. So how do we know that one in the future would work? And given that 9/11 was a good one, and boy, did we throw that in the trash pretty quick.
Yeah, I mean, there's no guarantee of anything. I mean, it's one variable that helps to generally unite people rather than divide them. That doesn't mean other things aren't going to subsequently come along to divide people again, or I mean, I think the division is in the best interest of a two-party system. I think as part of the
Mhm.
problem. I think the two-party system really makes division appealing as a political strategy. Um, and so that makes it hard.
How long, starting tomorrow, AOC, Trump, Squad, Ron DeSantis from Florida all start coming together and say, we need to do better. We need to have positive conversations with each other. How long do we need to have sustained conversation amongst leadership before you could say 1 to 300 million people start getting the message, start calming down? It's taken us years to get this far. Just a couple months of that? 1 year, 2 year, 15 years?
I mean, I guess I would say that, the longer, the more effective. The shorter, the less effective. I don't think there's like a particular finish line,
Okay.
but it would be one thing that would help, as opposed to many things that seem to be harming those efforts.
I'm kind of the opinion it's not something we could do in 3 months, right? 3 months of leaders getting along is not going to be enough of a message. We're looking at a couple of years, I imagine here. Would that be fair to say, or is that an unrealistic assumption?
I have no idea. I really don't. I think. I mean, it's all it's fantasy land. There's too much to be gained by division, I think, is the problem. This division is politically profitable, and so it's hard to imagine how or when different sides of the aisle are going to decide that unity is better than division. I think if you're a politician running in a difficult seat or whatever, you know, division is your friend.
I read a study that was showing how before Trump, the presidential candidates that focused more on division did better in elections. And they were looking at the last four presidents before Trump, and they were going, yeah, the guys who focused on division definitely did better. So
Yeah.
yeah.
I mean, certainly at the level of the primary, right? I mean, our primary system kind of rewards extremity, and that's tough.
We have the same political system we've had for a long time. We didn't used to have this much division. How did it go to be from we could have differences but make it work, but now there's too much to be gained? I mean, when did it happen where politicians are like, oh, division's the thing we go for? Because they didn't always do this. This is relatively new. How did it turn from we can have a healthy competition to it's about division and extreme messaging? And I know that because that's a relatively new phenomenon if we're looking over the last 50 to 60 years.
I mean, my understanding is a significant moment in the development of that approach was Lee Atwater, who was a Republican strategist in the 80s, in Bush Dukakis election, I think, really pushed for making, really, really divisive ads and really divisive policies. And, I think in the in the 90s, I would say Newt Gingrich made that the centerpiece of Republican politics. I mean, I'm not a political scientist, so this is just, yeah, this is just, but that certainly seemed to mark a shift, and I think that, yeah, um,
I
so
agree.
I mean, yeah, I think those things had contributed to it, and I don't know, like a loss in sort of a loss in belief that things are working here. I think really,
Ah,
fomented created a lot of opportunity for disruption. Um,
a lack of faith that the system works, that the institutions work for all of us.
yeah, I think so.
How do we bring people together? I've heard a lot about how you can reduce polarization by having people have good positive interactions meeting the other person, interpersonal contact with the other person. I realize they're a human being. They're not a character of an evil dastardly Republican that I saw on MSNBC. They're not a character of a pedophile loving pizza owner that I saw on Fox News about all Democrats. I realized they're actual real people with real concerns. They just have a different way of viewing it than me. My question is, I hear that we need to have these conversations between people to bring us together. My question is this: is a Republican in downtown San Francisco, California, going to have the same opinion on everything as a Republican who's lived his whole life in rural Kentucky?
Highly unlikely.
And so when I'm a liberal in San Francisco and I say political division bothers me as an American, I want to get out there and help make it better. I read research that says go have a positive interaction with someone who thinks differently. Okay, I went to my local Starbucks in downtown San Francisco and I met a guy who says he's Republican. And he says he's Republican for tax reasons. Maybe he's not so big on climate change, but he has no problem with LGBTQ rights, immigrants. He thinks people don't need to have machine guns. And I go, great. See, commonality with me and the Republicans, America fixed. Would I have that same reaction if I, as a San Francisco liberal who've lived there my whole time, suddenly was transported to rural Nebraska, rural Kentucky, and I'm meeting a guy who's only lived on the farm for 50 years, never really lived in a city? And could I get him to agree to the same things? Or would I find, wow, this Republican really has some social cultural differences than I do? Can we say that when you're meeting the San Francisco Republican versus the Kentucky Republican, that you're actually bridging the divide? Or are you really just meeting with somebody who technically calls himself a Republican, but kind of feels the way on social issues that everybody else in the neighborhood does?
I mean, I think the key is trying to find um, topics of mutual agreement with both of those people. If you can find things that you both care about or that you both believe and find ways to work together toward those things, and it's my perception is there's a lot more of that goes on in Congress than we generally hear about.
Hmm.
every really divisive bill we see that they can't agree on and that nothing ever happens. There are tons of other like more minor bills that people don't care so much about that they do seem to periodically be able to agree on.
True.
And so, I think the thing is looking for places for compromise and agreement, looking for places where we can figure out how to work for both sides, for both parties. I think right now it's tough because there's political gain and division. What we need is, we need the demonstration that compromise and that working together actually is more effective. That would surely help.
AOC and the squad were famous for opposing Donald Trump on almost everything. They did sign legislation with him, and you had Trump and the Republicans and all the Democrats basically vote all together on legislation. It just wasn't popularized. It would be votes for increasing domestic spying on us in violation of our rights and votes for additional Pentagon funding. They were all together as one on that. Why not publicize that? Hey, we're coming together on spying on our people and waging more wars abroad. We agree on this. See, everybody, unity. Was that the kind of messaging we should put out there to show everybody we can work together?
I think, the news media probably are much less interested in reporting on those kinds of things. They don't get as many clicks, I would guess. And so I think it's also, division is also profitable, I think, for the news media. And so they also tend to focus on conflict. Do I think those things would be helpful? I do think they would be. But those things just aren't going to be reported as much.
So we're living in a system now where division is profitable for the news media, and it works and provides benefits for politicians. I've heard of this as a feedback loop. The more extreme politicians, they get more news coverage, which helps their donations and votes. And the news shows extreme, someone saying something extreme on TV, they get more clicks, which is advertising revenue, and the thing just feeds off itself. Does that seem to make sense?
I think I think that's the crux of, the sort of structural problem is just the rewards and costs favor extremism for a lot of people with a lot of influence.
Have you ever done any marriage counseling or studied marriage counseling as in your field in psychology?
No, not me. I mean, I've been in marriage counseling.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was not trying to go there at all, Professor.
That's okay. I don't mind.
I was not trying to do that at all, Professor.
No worries.
I apologize. It's a lineup for the next question. So, Marjorie Taylor Greene, hold on. I know not everybody likes her. I get it. And her statement, her tweet on President's Day when Marjorie Taylor Greene said, left and right cannot live together anymore. We need a national divorce. And she was criticized for that. And it was inartful. And she didn't explain a lot of it and had to go on Hannity and add a couple more tweets to provide context. And I get that. My question is that when she said that, there was a lot of newspaper articles that said, Marjorie, we have no division, which is not true. I was surprised to see the media take that stance. But then the other one was that there was a Utah governor. And he said, Marjorie, you idiot. We don't need national divorce. We need national marriage counseling. That was picked up by 30 newspapers across America, widely reprinted. USA Today, Time, you name it, big time. Not one of those 30 newspapers could define it, though. So everyone picked it up and said it. Nobody could define it. I've talked to a variety of professors, and I've asked, what does marriage counseling look like for a population of 200 to 300 million that's been as polarized as we have over the last half decade? So that's my question to you as a professional psychologist. What does that marriage counseling look like?
Well, I assume what it means is open discussion and acknowledgement of problems and working towards finding a solution. I mean, if you're asking me like specifically organizationally how that happens, I don't
Yes.
know.
Okay.
But I take that to mean we should be discussing these things and trying to get better at them rather than just give up. That's probably how I would, hear that.
Typically,
But
people have said that the president is the spokesperson for the country, the father of the country, the voice of the country, the image of the country. Who other than the United States president could be a marriage counselor for all of us?
yeah, it's, I don't think there's really a single person who could do it. It would have to be, and it probably has to be more of a grassroots movement than a top-down movement. Like I think there's probably more joy to be found from new groups that are invested in dialogue and invested in civil debate. I think right now the division in our country is such that our leaders definitely aren't able to do that. Obama wasn't able to do that. Trump wasn't able to do that. Trump didn't want to. Obama, I think, really wanted to, but really had no luck at it. So yeah, I kind of feel like it would probably have to come from the ground up. Like even local at a time, school board meetings, town hall meetings. I feel like that those are the places maybe it has to start.
So while there might be some argument from academics, and I'm not asking you that the elites have caused polarization, it sounds like you're saying the cure is not going to come from the elites. If we're going to get out of this as Americans, it's going to come from us having hard conversations at the neighborhood level. Am I getting that right?
That would be, if that would be my thinking on it. Yeah. I think you can't, it's hard to tell people to, do this and do that and get along. But if people decide on their own that they think that would be helpful and useful, then I think that's going to be much more effective. I mean, it doesn't mean the elites don't have any role to play. They should be modeling that behavior themselves as well. They should be much more open to having dialogue with, their political enemies and trying to model what good behavior looks like. That would surely help. But I don't think it can come entirely from there.
And it wouldn't be quick, and it would take some time.
Yeah.
We don't know how long, but it wouldn't be quick. It would take some time, and it would require everybody on the ground trying to meet up with people who truly feel differently than them. Maybe not just your next door neighbor. It might be the guy a county over. But that would be a way out. Is that fair?
Yeah. And I think that may well require generational change. It require people who did not grow up in their formative years during this kind of conflict. I think that it's going to be hard for people our age to initiate that, I suspect. But it doesn't mean we shouldn't be trying. But I try and have more hope for the future that our kids look at all this and say, "This is crazy. Why are we doing it this way? We can do better." Yeah.
That's a strong statement, generational change, that we, even though we know it's a problem, even though we want it fixed, even though we see it as an issue, we might be too biased to actually do the healing. And we might need to have our children who weren't raised or inculcated with these kind of polarizing concepts to actually lead us on the way out.
Or just decide that they want to move in the other direction, take a hard look at it and say, this has really failed us. So I don't know. I mean, basically you just need people with different attitudes towards consensus, and whether that requires generational change or whether that requires, mass marital therapy, attitudes have to change.
That's pretty good. That's pretty good. And I really appreciate you coming on. And I wanted to get to the psychological background. I just had to cover some of the political science just to kind of frame the psychological questions I wanted to ask. And you did great. I really appreciate that. Is there anything you wanted to ask us? Is there something you wanted to go over? A statement you wanted to make? Something you wanted to cover?
Nope.
I have to ask. I have to ask because nobody has it. Okay, we're winding down. Let me ask you some of my last questions. Here's one of my favorite ones. I'm throwing it at you, but I'm letting you know, here's it coming. We don't do surprise journalism. Here's the hard raw question coming. Here it is. You're not you. You're not me. You're a third party person who watched this interview. It's a week from now. They're trying to recall everything they saw in this interview, and they thought it was pretty good. They learned a lot, psychologically and politically. It's 5 days from now. And they're going, I saw this interview with this one professor. It was pretty good. There was a lot of good stuff. I'm struggling to remember some of it. But there was this one thing the professor said on that topic. And boy, I can't get that out of my head. And it's 5 days from now. This could be a psychological insight. It could be an insight. It could be a philosophical insight. What would you want the lay public who watches this video to not be able to stop thinking about 5 days from now?
Nothing that I've said so far. I guess what I would say is if we don't like the sort of division that we have, and we don't like the extremitization that we have, that each individual has a responsibility to live by different standards, to be the system that they want to live in, to treat people the way they think they should be treated. I think it really will come from people deciding that we don't want to do this anymore, that this is not helpful. I think hoping that it's going to just change for us somehow, I don't think is likely. There's just too much to be gained right now. I don't have a ton of optimism. The structure of our political system really encourages this. We need a new constitution. we need to fix gerrymandering. We need to fix two-party politics. We need to fix, there's the primary system. There are all kinds of, structural things that have been weaponized by both parties, to sort of maximize, at least in their minds, that maximize success. That I think maybe any given campaign might be better for you and your party, but for the country as a whole, it's not helpful and quite harmful.
Win the battle, lose the war. I think something like that.
I think that's right. Yeah. And I think they're very focused. Our politicians are very focused on battles.
I won. Who cares what happens 2 years from now?
Yeah. Or we won this, we got this policy, we won it, or we got this election, we won it. And yeah, we had to get people, really hostile toward one another to do it, but we won. The long-term implications aren't great.
We passed this law. Yeah, it was passed by 52%. Yeah, it's super polarizing. Basically, half the country has it, hates it, but screw them. We won. All right, moving on. Yeah, I could see how that would upset some people. That's. I like your comment. I really liked how you were talking about how maybe the elites are signaling, but it's going to be the people themselves. This is at the ground level. We are actually doing it to each other. Even if the elites tomorrow said, hey, everybody, we're going to behave better, it wouldn't snap back into place. It would take a while of them displaying that behavior for everybody to get it. And on top of that, it would still have to be translated to the people on the ground doing the hard work themselves. And that this would take a long time to do it. And that we ourselves might be too biased living in this time to actually be the ones to do it correctly.
I mean, we can certainly try, and we can do better than we've been doing. But I think I really feel like it's going to have to come largely, or not largely, but I think people I feel like my kids look at this and they just think we're crazy.
Yeah.
And they think this is dysfunctional. And why is our society and political system seems so dysfunctional right now? And I hope that will generate motivation on their part to do things differently.
There was this movie starring Cillian Murphy. He's an Irish actor. He's been in a lot of movies. He played Scarecrow in the Batman movies. But when he got started, he was a small-time actor, and it was a small indie film. And I think it was called Pluto on Jupiter, or Judo on Pluto. Basically, he was a transgendered guy in the 1970s during the Irish Rebellion. And everybody looked at him like, oh my God, you are so weird because you're dressing transgendered in the 70s. And here's the running joke. He's going, hey, don't go out there and shoot those people. It'll just lead to more killing. You're crazy. You dress like a woman. And the whole thing is about how all these people are just blowing each other away left and right. Just everybody gets killed. And the guy who's seen as the weirdo is the only sane one. But it takes us 20 to 30 years to realize that. It took him 20, 30 years that, hey, if you want to be transgender, that is way more rational than getting a gun and shooting your neighbor in the face. And that was the whole movie. And it was just this it was almost like a dark humor movie. Like everybody thought he was crazy and he was the only sane one. The whole world was mad. Everybody thought shooting your neighbor was a cool idea. And it took a weirdo like him to lead them out.
I think what happened in Ireland is a really great example of how, a stable, almost impossible problem to solve was solved. And largely because the people on both sides were tired of it. They wanted it done and over. They didn't want their kids to have to live through the same crap that they lived through. And that was one where, sure, there's good leadership that helped, but eventually, the people voted, and they quite clearly wanted this done.
I remember that. Yes, I remember Sinn Féin was the political party to the IRA, and they were pretty militant, except for the last 2 years of negotiation, when you actually had the leader of the Sinn Féin was starting to get a little bit angry with the IRA and saying, damn it, we're close to an agreement.
Yeah.
You guys need to calm down. And that's when it started happening, because you had the political branch of the IRA was like this with the IRA. And then they started getting agreements and compromises and started pulling them apart. And then Sinn Féin's like, bro, you need to calm it down. We are really close to getting everything we want. And then you started seeing a lot of the Irish go, oh, we're close to this ending. Okay, you need to put that gun away. No, Grandpa, don't get the gun out. I don't care. We're close. Don't go out and shoot your neighbor today. We're close to settlement. And you're right. It was a lot of the people, because the leader Sinn Féin was going, I'm hearing from the public, they want a negotiation now. They don't want let's have a couple more shootings and see if we can get better terms. They want an agreement now. And it was absolutely where the elites were following the will of the public, because the public did what you said. We're tired of this. And if we actually have a way out, stop what you're doing, and you better get a negotiation for us. And it was clear the people had spoken in Ireland. They were done with it. They were tired. Backing up what you're saying. Great story. I'll end it there. I want to say thank you for coming on. I really appreciate it. Is there any questions you had or anything you wanted to cover more?
No.
Okay. Well, I really appreciate it. Thank you for coming on. I hope you found this was painless and a fair interview. Okay.
Yeah, it was great. It was fun.
Do you know anybody else who might be willing to be part of a general conversation about this topic? You don't have to, but we always ask.
Let me think about it. I can send you an email. I'll think about it and email you.
I'll send you an email in a little bit with a copy of this video, and I appreciate any recommendations you have. And if not, that's cool too, but we always ask.
Okay. Sounds good.
Thank you, Professor. I will email you shortly, and I really appreciate you coming out.
Yeah, thank you for inviting me.